Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 9:30, so it is time to open this session for Matter 13 of the Sandwell Local Plan examination. I'm Catherine Jack, and I'm the inspector appointed to examine this plan. We're fully virtual again today, and everybody participating today has already participated in a similar session, so you know exactly how this is going to run, which will be just the same as in previous sessions. So I won't go through all my guidance notes, etc. this morning. However, for the sake of anybody watching the live stream, we will do our normal introductions before we get started. And if there's anything that you want to update me on or explain at that point, then that would be a good moment to do so. So we'll go to the council's room first. Mr. Richards, introductions for the council, please.
Yes, thank you, madam. Good morning. Hugh Richards, planning barrister advising the council.
Yeah, morning. Patricia McCullough, Sandwell Council.
Good morning, Mark Watkins, Sandwell Council.
Good morning, Bart Sherm, Sandwell Council.
Morning, Andy Miller, Sandwell Council.
Thank you. Mr. Miller's out of shot, but we can hear him. There he is. Good morning, Mr. Miller. Okay, thank you. And Ms. Barton, please.
Thank you, Inspector. Good morning, everyone. Holly Barton of SIBO Planning, representing Vulcan Property.
Lovely, thank you very much. Would you like to explain the point that the programme officer mentioned that you've provided an email about? That relates to something we were discussing yesterday, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Inspector.
Thank you.
So as fellow participants may remember yesterday regarding Matter 6 in relation to air quality, I advised that I would go back to my notes and come back to confirm about the national policy threshold and what guidance says about air quality assessments and the trigger for those. I must admit, part of the reason why I was struggling to find that is because actually planning policy guidance delegates really the thresholds to local authorities in terms of thresholds upon which an air quality assessment may be triggered. So planning practice guidance confirms assessments would need to be proportionate to the nature and scale of development proposed and the potential impacts, taking into account existing quality conditions, and because of this are likely to be locationally specific. The scope and content of supporting information is best discussed and agreed between the local planning authority and the applicant before it is commissioned. My request, or our request yesterday with regards to policy SHW3 maintains that we would advise and encourage that it is updated to include named thresholds in its current wording, particularly, sorry, just one second. At this moment in time, the current wording advises that a air quality assessment, part 2 of the policy states that new development must demonstrate how its occupiers and users would be affected by air quality. And in its current form, it therefore perhaps requires householder applications to potentially trigger an air quality assessment. Our recommendation is that either within the policy wording itself or supporting text, there is a bit more of a guidance that talks about thresholds. And our suggestion as a starter for 10 is that it is for major development proposals, where at least a discussion with the authority is triggered in terms of the scope of an assessment.
Okay, thank you very much. So that is, your position stays the same essentially, because it was whether the point about a major threshold at the national policy level was what you were going to go away and look for and confirm, wasn't it? So your position about a major threshold trigger point stays exactly the same as was discussed under matter 6.
That's correct.
So we won't reopen the discussions for matter 6, but I will go to the council just in case there's anything that they want to say in response to the additional position that you've just said, which I understand you've set out in an email, which can become an examination document, and will go on the website in due course. Mr. Richards, anything from the council, and perhaps you'd just like to very quickly respond on whether householder developments would be captured.
Yes, well,
Then we'll move to today's proper agenda.
the first point is that our position hasn't changed yesterday. We addressed you yesterday on the basis that there wasn't a national policy threshold. So I don't think we can usefully add anything to that. As to whether householder development would be caught by policy 2 in SHW3, I think this is one of those cases where on the planning application, the householder for the householder development, the applicant would simply say that we don't think that this development, whether it's an extension or some other modest form of development, would be likely to have any effect on air quality, and the local authority would simply decide whether to accept that or not, and that would be the extent of the conversation. It would be very difficult to think of an example where it would, but what policy 2 requires is a demonstration, which could simply be an agreement between the two that there is nothing to be demonstrated.
Okay, thank you very much.
If you think that some additional explanation might be advisable in the explanatory text, then we will, of course, accede to your request as usual. But for the moment, we're not going to suggest anything. But if you come back to us later, Inspector, then of course we'll do so.
Okay, thank you very much. I will think on that, and we'll leave it there for now, and we'll move to the matter 13 agenda. But thank you, everybody. Right, so matter 13 today, we are looking at plan delivery and housing land supply. Essentially looking at whether the plan will provide for a sufficient housing land supply to deliver the planned scale of housing growth over the plan period, and whether a deliverable 5-year supply of housing will be available on adoption. Ms. Barton, I'm just going to come to you first, if I may, just to get an understanding of, was there a particular point on the agenda that you wanted to join in, or a particular point that you would like to make at the start of the discussion? What would suit you best today?
Thank you, Inspector. I am following on from largely discussions relating to week 1, appearing to be able to participate in terms of discussion about housing trajectory, where there is potentially scope for my client's site to be able to potentially be brought forward in terms of its trajectory, in terms of what is currently in the local plan as an emerging position, and also to be able to participate just in terms of echoing previous discussion of densities of development, and these being at a minimum threshold, as opposed to something that's potentially more stringent.
Okay, so would you like to set out your thinking about the timing of your client's site briefly now, and then we'll have that in mind as we're talking through the supply documents as we go through. That would be helpful. So remind me what the SH number is for your site. Can you remember?
It is SH 38.
38. Thank you. Braids Road, Old
That's
Green.
correct.
Yeah, so currently, well, it's difficult to see on the screen what year it's proposed, but
2033,
sometime after
I think.
2030, isn't it?
34, 35.
Or
Yes, that's
35.
correct.
Thank you. Involves a lot of scrolling up and down, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would you like to say about that position in the trajectory?
So from discussions with our client and subject to an allowance of time to be able to obviously prepare a planning application and to allow for determination, we anticipate that it could be deliverable as early as 2030 to 2031 as a year.
You expect 2030 to 31, and all of the homes to come forward as soon as that?
Potentially. In terms of our position, we see no reason as to why that should be precluded, albeit obviously it wouldn't be precluded in terms of it wouldn't prevent it being delivered sooner than that. But in the interests of partly trying to seek to assist the authority in delivering homes and potentially allowing for this to be within its 5-year housing land supply potentially, we see no reason as to why that could not be an indicative timescale for completion.
So is that your client's intention, or you're saying potentially, is but that obviously brings in some degree of flexibility and arguably a degree of doubt over that position. So, but your client's intention is to bring it forward sooner than is currently shown?
Yes, that is correct.
But some sort of wiggle room around exactly when.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Any particular thoughts on that from the council at the moment? And it might just be something that comes up again in conversation later, but any initial response?
We're grateful for the indication as to when it might come forward, because in the Reg 19 reps at number 1302, it was clear that there was an intention to bring it forward earlier than the council was showing in the appendix, but there wasn't a date given in the rep. I think 2030/31 still puts it just outside the 5-year supply period, but we don't make any criticism of that.
No.
But obviously, all of these delivery dates are our best estimate based on the evidence that we have at the time, and it ought to be clear to every developer that if a planning application comes forward and delivery looks likely sooner than is shown in the directory, you won't be sent away and told to wait till you're third in the queue.
Okay. Right, we will thank you for that for now, Ms. Barton. We'll see if that needs to enter into further bits of discussion later on.
And perhaps we could also just confirm that it's still the intention for 51 units, as which is what we're showing in the trajectory.
Yeah, Ms. Barton?
As a matter of the capacity, our position and that of our client is that the 51 rate should potentially not be included in terms of we see that as a figure, but it could be potentially, well, we see that is a limited capacity of the site. In terms of our position, we would be of the view that it could be larger than that. I appreciate this is it is difficult in terms of enabling that flexibility and also uncertainty in terms of that specific rate. We are of the view that potentially ideally there would be no indicative density for this site. We know as to why it is indicative, but the quoting of a density is potentially gives an impression of it being more of a target. Our client would seek to deliver greater than that, subject to being able to adhere to development management policies and of the site specifics.
Okay, that understood, but set aside. 51, it's a reasonable working figure, is it, at the moment, though? Although you might have that intention to go higher, and obviously there are several years between now and when you would be likely to be delivering. The planning application process has got to happen in the middle, but there's nothing to say that 51 is screamingly out of the ballpark, if you like, in terms of what we need to consider at the moment. Is it a reasonable figure to keep in for now?
It is a reasonable figure. Just to echo representations from previous sessions, we were very much of the view that these are at minimums almost to some extent. We wouldn't want the 51 rate or 51 dwelling capacity to, as I say, be seen as a target. Our position is that the deliverability of that site could have a greater capacity. But no, in terms of if there is needing to be a figure, that is reasonable, as long as it is not a prescriptive rate.
Yeah, it's just an indicator at this point in time. And obviously the plan is looking for at least its housing requirement, isn't it? Subject to its other policies. Council, anything briefly in response to that? You happy with keeping it 51 for now?
Yeah, and I think it's common ground. It's not likely to be less than that.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get into, a slightly more detailed discussion about whether there's convincing evidence of 5-year supply, etc., I just want to sort of take stock of where we are with the various graphs and tables, etc., because that has been moving on over time, unsurprisingly, and what the various figures and the underlying assumptions that we've got in the latest versions. So there are various documents that came in relating to 5-year supply, including the topic paper and some work the council put together following my initial letter back in March. To a large extent, while there's lots of background in there about how your methodology for what goes into the various tables, to a large extent, the numbers have moved on a bit, haven't they, since then, due to the passage of time. And to some extent, there's likely to be some more changes due to discussions we've had through the hearing sessions as well. So the most recent document that we've now got in the examination library is the one that the council has prepared following the Matter 7 session, which has got the reference SAED 81. You prepared that following Matter 7, ready for today. In the council statement, there are also some other graphs, including and other tables, figures, etc., including some with discounting, some without discounting. So I just need to, and we might need to clarify as we go through when we're looking at different bits as well, exactly what we're looking at when. But the SAED1 document, have those been based, everything in there being based on taking off all the discounts.
Do you mean the latest, the SAED 81?
81, yes, sorry, did I say
Yeah.
one? Yeah,
Yes.
81. Yeah. I've just realised.
Agree with
that's
that
it.
Yeah, we were delving into the depths of the art.
I think, yes, SAED 1 is something completely different. Yes, SAED 81. Is that discount free, essentially everything in there, as far as you're concerned?
That's what we understood you wanted us to show.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Okay. The total number of completions for 24 and 25, the 24-25 year, which is year one of the plan period, I've seen a figure of 615 for that year. Is that correct? And is that the confirmed sort of final
Yes.
figure for that year now? Okay, and the new site that you consulted on, the MM1 site, Rowley Regis Golf Course, the intention with that proposed additional allocation was to revise the plan's housing requirement figure, presumably upwards by the 250 capacity that's seen for that site.
It had actually been included previously,
Ah,
so it was already in there, but obviously now it won't be discounted. So we'd included it in there because we'd done a main modification on it and consulted on it, so we put it in. So it's not really an addition. if you see what I
but
mean.
it wasn't in at the time of the Reg 19 plan, though, was it? So when the 10,434 figure.
Yeah, it's not included. It's not included in the requirement for the submitted version of the local plan. I thought that we proposed it as a main modification.
Yeah,
And the-
in
so-
the
knock
main
on-
modification.
Yes, with the knock on of if that main modification was accepted, we would then need to include it within 10.434.
Yeah, I mean that's the impression I get because document SAED 50 has got some red wording that says inclusion of the allocation will impact the SLP housing requirement figure and trajectory and will require an amendment to the policies map. Now, obviously, my understanding is that that additional site essentially arose from the Reg 19, the main
Yes.
Reg 19 consultation on the plan.
Yeah.
So that would mean a tweak to the housing requirement figure, wouldn't it? The overall requirement figure in SDS 1.
Yes. Sorry, yes, I'm getting.
Yeah. And the knock-on for number crunching, if you like, for 5-year supply.
Yeah.
The requirement figure includes all of your allocations, doesn't it? So it would be anomalous not to include this one as well. And I'm sure that is what the intention
Yeah, sorry, I'm
was
just
from what you published.
Yeah, I'm thinking of giving you the whole figure in that table, and that does include it. But yes,
Yeah.
added to the requirement. So yes, sorry, yeah.
Okay, so there's obviously going to need to be some, a degree of alignment across all the documents in light of all of the likely main modifications.
Have we just,
Sorry, Mr.
Sorry.
Richards.
let's just double check. Have we just got to the position where we've agreed that those numbers are in SAED 81, the latest table, but the other figures in the plan need to be brought up to date to include that as part of the supply?
And to the requirement is 10.434.
Yes.
And it's in the supply on the paper we submitted, but we need it to add it to the 10.434 because the requirement
Correct.
increased.
Yeah. So the
Absolutely.
plan's housing requirement will go up to accommodate it.
Yeah.
Is essentially what the position would be. in light of MM1 and what we said at the consultation. My understanding is your new table 5 in SAED 81, you're saying you've already factored in the additional 250. Yeah. Now, of course, in adding the additional 250 to the 10434 is also going to lead to a tweak to your annualized requirement figure.
Yeah.
Which is also obviously going to have a knock-on with your 5-year supply calculation.
Yeah.
And I think there is an anomaly in our latest work. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because we're still on the.
That's what I spotted.
Yeah, we're
Yes.
still on for the 1043.
Because if we look at the second page of that document, right at the bottom where the 5-year housing land supply, we're still working on an annual requirement of 10434 divided by 17.
Yes.
And what we need to do is to
68.
update that.
So I think it would go to 628.
Yeah.
Or
Well, it
rounding up to
depends. It
69.
depends when the base date of the 5-year supply is going to be.
No, that's
because-
to get the annual figures.
Yeah, but if we assume that we've had 615 net completions already,
Well, in terms of the
that's not going to make any
annualized,
difference because it's almost exactly 1 year on the old money, isn't it? So
It's to get the annualised figure. So the
the
new
annualized figure will be over the plan period.
period, yes,
So
6
that-
to 8.
so make
All
it
the way through. Yeah.
so the 628 would be rounding up 629. Is
Yes.
okay.
Okay.
Um,
And then did you, still looking at that table, 5-year supply table at the bottom of the second page of SAED 81, has got the same supply in years result of 514, 5 years 0.14, as was in your statement, I think. But I'm not sure whether you'd switched off the discounts on supply when you first calculated 5.14.
I had included discounting in the 5-year supply. That was on the gross.
Okay.
In the original. Never applied the discounting because of having the buffer.
Yeah.
So at the moment, that table being reworked needs to replace 614 with 628.
That's what it's sounding like. Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I was expecting you to say about the the new figure. That's what I thought it was on the brief calculation. Which will obviously have a knock-on supply, but you're telling me you've already included gross supply, so there's everything else should
It's just doing
be the same, but the output will be different.
Yeah.
And obviously the buffer will be 628, not 614 as well.
That's so we have to add on.
You'll have to recalculate the 20%, won't you?
Yes. Well, it'll be another year, won't it? 20%.
Yes.
So that's 628 as well.
So the output will be slightly different.
We'll just get our calculators out and
Well, this is something that we can take a view on as to whether it's helpful to perhaps take a short break so that you can crunch the numbers, but we won't do that just yet, but maybe a little bit later if necessary, because there might be other factors that need to be taken into account as well. So the other point I just wanted to confirm with you, and I think it's already included, was the extra police station sites. You said they've always been included in the supply, didn't you? So that's not? And had they always been included in the overarching housing requirement figure?
Yes.
Okay, so I know it's only sort of 10 units or something, but
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
consistency's sake, you need to be clear on that. So I'm sure, I think you did say to me before, it was just the error of leaving it off the Appendix B list, but you'd counted it. Okay. So we shouldn't need an adjustment for that as well then. So last week in the Matter 9 session, we had some discussions about certain sites where there were possibly some discrepancies with capacity or likely first completion dates, some of which were acknowledged, and they might affect what's in the tables that you've provided as appendices A and B to your statement, because you wrote that before we had those discussions. So particularly in terms of where things fall in the trajectory, I think, and there's only a few that I just wanted to raise at this point. But first of all, we heard from the site proponent for the Cape Arm site, SH55, and there was a discussion about the capacity of that one, which was in as 170, but I think you've already changed that down to 120. Just confirming in the tables here. Yeah. So that one's okay. And that was for the full site area, wasn't it? So
yeah.
Then if we can just look at Friar Park, which was SH18. Now, obviously I heard that a planning application was the word imminently expected, but no particular date given on that. That's got a big capacity for homes of 614, but there were obviously some complexities around that site that were discussed. I'm just wondering, it's October now, it's not far off 2026. You've currently got first completions 88 coming through in 28, 29. Is that realistic, or is that more likely to be slightly further back?
Well, what our regen colleagues have advised is that they expect a completion of a minimum of 350 dwellings by March 2032.
And that's due to a contractual requirement to deliver by that point with their development partner.
Right. March 2032.
A completion of a minimum of 350 dwellings, yeah.
Yeah, that's in the grant funding.
That is in the grant agreement.
Yeah, that's related to the agreement for grant funding.
Yeah, okay. So I heard about the grant funding. It's a relatively short lead-in time for a big site, isn't it? That's all. It's just.
But what often happens in those situations is that the affordable housing is all front-loaded.
Okay, and that 350 figure is where the 88, 86 has come from. They look like random numbers, but they're just divvying up the 350 across those 4 years. So Lion Farm, and I appreciate this isn't part of the 5-year supply. First completion's 2033. there any reason to suggest that's not reasonable?
No, I don't think so, because it is putting together that package and then putting the application through, and so I think we feel that is reasonable.
Okay, and the main one that we talked about that there did seem to be constraints with was SM1, which was Chance's Glass Works. And you know, that one obviously had considerable constraints that we talked about. So that one says first completions in 2030, which I think was generally accepted was not probably going to be realistic. Yeah, it's very optimistic. So that's likely to need
moving,
pushing backwards, and certainly isn't likely to be part of the 5-year supply, is it?
No, it's not part of the 5-year supply anyway, but yeah, I agree. I think it's very ambitious, so you should need to go and join the other figures that are at the end of that.
Yeah, we come to a reasonable view about when that might be, but it is going to be later in the plan period, realistically, it looks, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Most these will drop off the end of the plan.
So let's look at 5 years then. The table on the 3rd page of SAD 81, you're showing me current in green, the current next 5 years. The plan will need to show 5 years supply at the anticipated likely point of adoption, because you want the plan to confirm 5 years supply. So we need to have a think about when that is realistically likely to be. As we've noted, it's October now. Even with a strong tailwind, there will be further work to do for modifications, consultation, etc. The council's view then on whether 25-26 is going to be the likely adoption point, I suspect not. Yeah. More likely would be what you've currently got as year 2.
Yeah.
Which would potentially bring 2030 and 31 into that 5-year period from the likely point of adoption, wouldn't it? That does. Am I making sense? If I go too quickly, or
Yes, but the way that bottom table works is that the figure given for 26-27 is 6.09 years.
Mm-hmm.
That figure there, that 6.09 figure is looking at 5 years forwards from 2026-27.
Yes.
Yeah. So in other words, what that table is showing is a 5-year supply on adoption.
Yep.
And in the following year, and in the following year, and in the following year, but not at the moment in the year after that, which is 2030-31.
Yes. Which
those figures will have to be reworked and tweaked for the 170 down to 120 point and anything else we've done.
But it
doesn't. Yeah, but it doesn't look as though that 6.09 figure will plummet by a whole year.
No.
So, although there may be a different figure, it's not likely to be. None of those figures are likely to dip under 5 years.
No, and yes, because you're going to make it's a relatively small overall change to the housing
That,
requirement.
yes,
And what some of the tweaks we're talking about to where things sit in the supply will have a potentially modest effect,
Yeah.
but we're not, so far we haven't identified anything of
I
great
mean-
scale.
no,
I wanted
mean,
to
if
talk
you-
about the headline points,
Yeah.
so we've discussed all the key issues really, rather than the 0.9s, because there is some more number crunching to be done.
Yes,
But as long as we've talked through the important elements of it, then I think we will have achieved what we need to achieve by sitting in the same, well, not that we are in the same room, but sitting in the same forum and me asking questions and having this discussion. But until such time as you've reworked the figures, there's no point us talking about the second decimal point on anything, because it will be changing. Now we'll probably revisit that table in a minute, but the next thing I want to think about are in your Appendix B table, one that was appended to your hearing statement, the big long table of sites, and this is the sites that are included at the moment in 5-year supply. And the question relates to the sites without planning permission and whether those are realistically, and they're quite far down, I think you have to scroll down for those.
Yeah.
Find them.
28.
There's a collection of them, and the question relates to whether they haven't got planning permission, well, unless you're going to tell me that some of them have now. The sites without planning permission, are they going to realistically deliver within the 5-year supply, or at least are they going to deliver as soon in the supply as they're currently shown if they haven't yet got consent? And that links into thinking about the trajectory, and there's a bit of a peak coming in the trajectory in 2028, 29, 30, according to the way it's currently shown. Is that peak really coming quite as soon, and is it going quite as high as shown, or is it more likely? Might it be more likely that it's going to be slightly more gentle, but perhaps slightly more tapered, which would obviously affect the figures in the table above?
3, 1, and then 5, and 2 in the 5-year supply.
I'm just wondering whether some of that is, in reality, is going to be a little bit further back.
In other words, what you're saying is if we look at the trajectory and the orange bars, you're suggesting that the peak might be flatter and pushed further to the right.
That is my question. Would it be? Because you've got some sites there that you're including in 5-year supply. You know they haven't got planning permission yet. There's been a passage of time already, and the question is perhaps that's going to come a little bit
I mean, with
later, which might influence the figures you get for 2030, 31, 32 potentially.
Yeah.
Some kids.
But I'm putting it to you as an overarching question as to whether that might be a reasonable position. You probably need to number crunch that to some extent.
Well, the first peak year, if we can call it that, is 28, 29.
Yes.
And in that year, if we look to the table underneath the peak to 28-29, we can see that what is forecast to come through without planning permission is 311 units.
Mm.
And then the next year of the peak is the following year, where we're forecasting 502 units from sites which currently do not have planning permission.
Mm.
So to rephrase your question, what you're asking us is, are you sure that those two figures are of 311 and 502 are robust?
Yes. Are they a little bit high in reality?
Yeah. We can now look at the schedule of sites and see where those sites are and who's promoting them. So first of all, the 311 sites in 2028-29 without planning permission.
That will include Fry Park, 2 of those years. There's start of North Smethwick Canal side. That's in that there. There's quite a lot. There's quite a few sites that are in the Grove Lane Master Plan area, and again, so with those, there have been discussions going on. There's this part, the CPO is part of one of the sites.
They have funding in place as well through the Levelling Up Fund.
So remediation.
So yeah, for site remediation and site assembly works, and through the town's fund.
Okay.
And then there's some of the 5-year supplies within the West Brom Master Plan areas again. Again, there's funding in place for some of those sites to come forward.
And although a planning submission hasn't been made, particularly West Bromwich Central, there's already preparatory works ongoing. So the council has been acquiring land ownership, has already demolished some of the buildings on site there, and is preparing to demolish another building in Cinema soon as well. So although we haven't received a planning submission, there is work ongoing to bring that site forward on the ground at the moment.
Okay.
There's a couple of other sites again that haven't got permission, but they're part of the council 5-year housing programme. And so they're looking to bring those forward as well. There's about 4 or 5 of those sites.
And again, some of those are at different stages. One of them is the former Langley Baths, which the swimming baths that's SH40, for example, that's 20 units.
Yes, they're looking to submit to this, looking to start in 2026 on Langley. Railway Street looking to start in 2026. Again, Copy Street and Harvest Road.
North Smethwick Canal.
2026 is next year, isn't it? So it's very close.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not necessarily a problem, and obviously we can't know all of this exactly when everything is going to start.
No.
It is all about the information that best information that you've got, isn't it? But I suppose part of what I'm thinking is you'll be doing some more work on this in light of the main modifications anyway, because everything's going to need to align. And obviously it's not necessarily, I know we've said the figures need to tweak, but the 5-year supply position is looking reasonably healthy in the early part of the plan.
Yeah.
So even if some of these realistically are going back a little bit, and the trajectory is more likely to be slightly more, as Mr. Richards described it, as sort of a bit flatter and a bit pushed to the right, isn't necessarily going to cause a problem, but it might, it might be more realistic in terms of the evidence that you've got and the passage of time that's happened so far. My point, I think, is that when you're reviewing what's in here when you're drafting main modifications, when we get to that point, is to have a think about that, and if some of them do realistically need to move, then it might be better to move them rather than go by what the evidence is actually telling you and where we've got to on the calendar, to some extent, rather than hold hard and fast to a date that probably isn't going to happen, because it's not necessarily going to damage your supply position.
Yes, and as you will have gathered, even though we're not in the same room, officers who've been giving you information this morning are in a great flurry of emails, which I could see on the tape from various people. So there is specific evidence about delivery of these sites without planning permission.
Yeah.
But what I think what we will look at is a sort of overall sensitivity test, saying, well, we're being told that 311 units without planning permission will be delivered in 2028-29. What would be the position if 30% of them were slipped a year? And again, we're being told that 502 units without a current planning permission will be delivered in 29-30. What would be the position if a percentage of those slipped to the following year?
And because obviously some of the evidence that you've got will be from Regulation 19 and point of submission, and underpinning that information that you gave me at that point in time. And the reality is we have already moved on.
Yes.
Since you submitted the plan in December.
And we can see what
as
on the plan,
part of that process
Yeah.
of preparing the mods and updating these to align with the mods, I think that needs to be borne in mind, so that what we get to when we go out to consultation at modification stage will be as up to date as it can be, and then that effectively will be a cut-off, won't it?
Yes.
Going out to consultation on the main mods. But everything that goes into these figures needs to align with everything else. So
yes.
Okay. So next question relating to 5-year supply relates to whether there's going to be any shortfall that you might need to take into account. We know that it's 615 for last year, so there might be a little tiny bit, mightn't there, if the annual figure's going up to 628 to factor in.
Yes. 13 units.
Yeah, they all count. So that would need to be obviously factored in when you redo your 5-year supply table. And then perhaps we'll talk about windfall next. Because I raised the query about windfall and whether the figures were possibly anomalous, particularly for the last several years, where they seem to have jumped up, which you've looked into on the second page of SAED 81. And the answer essentially was there were some large windfall sites that had slipped into the figures and have now been taken out.
Yes.
And that obviously changes the annual average looking back over 10 years. And you've now got a figure of 119, which seems much smoother. It's taken out that big sort of anomalous peak towards in more recent years. And the percentage total is more in line with what's been happening looking back even beyond 10 years, isn't it? So you have changed to 119 in the final table, the back page of this document. What you've not done, you haven't included any windfall at all in the first 5 years of the plan. Have you included any windfall in your 5-year supply calculation? I don't think you have.
No.
You?
No, it's just identified sites.
That's quite a robust position.
It's a yes. I mean, do you want to speak to that, Mr. Richards?
Well, it's commendably robust. Quite often, in years 4 and 5, windfalls are taken into account, because quite often the avoidance for the need of double counting is judged to sort of run over the first 3 years of a 5-year period rather than in years 4 and 5. But you can give a steer. If you think that it would be reasonable to include windfalls in either years 4 or 5, then we'll do so.
It's commonly done.
Yeah.
You have taken as a cautious approach by not including any at all. The windfall position that you've now calculated, the 119, then I'll need to come to a firm view as to whether that's a reasonable approach. But in principle, including windfall, not in the first 3 years of your 5-year supply, but after that, in principle, could be included. Provided, you need to be satisfied that there wouldn't be double counting, and I will need to be satisfied of that as well. So the reason you didn't do it was an abundance of caution, essentially, was it? Is that?
Yes.
I mean, as we've already discussed, there are swings and roundabouts here. The sites come in and out, or the capacity goes up and down. We still don't know what you will decide on certain sites like Rattlechain, which may have to come out altogether in due course. We don't know. But it would seem reasonable to assume some form of windfall allowance as a potential swing to put into the mix with all the roundabouts.
Yes, because you haven't allocated those smaller sites. Okay. As we've mentioned, the plan, and we've talked about this briefly before, back in week 1, the plan seeks to confirm your 5-year housing land supply position, paragraph 7.11. And I think I said to you previously, obviously, in order to be able to do that, it will need to set out what that position is. So a table will need to go into the plan to do that.
And that will be after our discussion today with an assumed 2026-27 base year.
That seems to be the likely position. I mean, it only needs to be the anticipated point of adoption, but I think it's fair to say we shouldn't be anticipating it in the current year. I think we discussed under matter 7 that the probably the most likely place to put your 5-year supply table in the plan was with policy SHO 1. I mean, I'm open to your views on that, but that seems the most likely, most convenient place to put it, because that's the policy that talks about how you're going to deliver the overall requirement in SDS 1. And that will need to go in as a main modification in due course once whatever that figure is worked out, and assuming it does confirm what you need it to confirm with the 5-year supply. We've also talked about likelihood of rolling 5-year supply. And there might be some changes to that again in the light of what we're talking about and what we've talked about over the previous couple of weeks. It's clearly going to taper off, even if these figures change. It's going to taper off on the evidence through the plan period. And we've talked previously about the fact that this plan has, to some extent, a limited shelf life because of the transitional arrangements, haven't we? The expectation of the framework and the transitional arrangements is that Sandwell will be starting work on a new plan effectively immediately when the new system comes into being. Is that a commitment of the councils as well? It's not just an expectation of the framework. I think does your LDS already set out work for that?
Might just have to, with the SDS, just follow on from that. But yeah, it's in the commitment. We're committed to do that. It's in the LDS. Okay.
And that obviously needs to be a whole new plan, doesn't it? It's not just a review of this one. It's a new plan is how it's set out in the framework.
With shorter policies.
Potentially, that's for you, not for me.
Well, that's what the guidance came to say.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with a long policy.
Yeah. Wait and see what the new regs say.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and we know that that's all going to be in the context of the SDS, which again, we don't know much detail about that yet, but the likelihood is that your new plan will be needing to be in general conformity with whatever the SDS situation is. Should this plan say something about that position, because it seems the council is committed to doing that work, and whilst you can't confirm what the new regime is going to be, I'm thinking in part in relation to your housing delivery and your not meeting the 80% minimum of your overall level of need, but also in terms of delivery, monitoring and implementation. We're sliding sort of into that area now as well. On page 417 of the plan, it talks about circumstances under which you would commence an early review of the plan, paragraph 16.2. But actually, there's a whole different context going on as well, separate from that you will anyway be expected to start a new plan. So I mean, what are the council's thoughts on any of that, and what the plan might say on your position and your commitment to a new plan?
Well, I think we could factually set out the position in that very short chapter 16, couldn't we?
Yeah.
The timing of the bringing forward of the new plan on the basis of the plan making system as we currently understand it looks likely to be, once there is a clear enough steer from the SDS work. I mean, I don't say that it will have to, submission will have to wait until the SDS is adopted, because there might be provision for a parallel process. I don't know. We simply don't know. I mean, I would have thought that if the government says that local authorities can wait until they see what comes out of the SDS process, that's not going to result in replacement local plans coming forward as quickly as the government might wish. So we can't say with certainty when a new plan is likely to be submitted yet. Who knows, by the time of May month, we might be able to have more certainty. But we can certainly anticipate that work will start on the new plan. Whether we cross through any of the gateways and at what time we do, we won't be able to say at the moment. But certainly we work like call for sites and that sort of thing. We'll start almost immediately. The officer's time is freed up from this process.
So, yes, so in terms of the framework's expectation for you to start work on the new plan as soon as the new system comes into being, the council's position is you're committed to doing so, from what I'm hearing, and you've already started to set that out by putting it in your LDS, and you were telling me the other day that that sort of process has started at the combined authority level for the SDS as well, albeit without the certainty of the legal framework for it yet.
In Sandwell's case, it will simply be required. The SDS process will simply try and set a requirement figure based on what's available. You know, it'll be a supply-led requirement figure again, I'm quite sure. In Sandwell's case, not the same for other authorities in the SDS area, but in the case of Sandwell, it'll simply be required to produce as much as it can.
Well, we shall see. We won't worry about what the future plan might say for you as part of this examination. But okay, so updating chapter 16 to reflect that position. And we talked previously when we were at SDS 1, I think it is, about the need for the requirement in there that talks about the allocations and how that one, we've already got that noted that that's going to need updating because you're doing the allocations in a different way, which obviously also relates to how you're going to deliver the plan. The trajectory graph in the plans appendices, and you were keen to keep it there when we talked about where it should be the other day. You seemed keen to keep it in the appendix. We talked about the need to put the table in which sets out the year by year expectations. That I think it's the table that you've produced at the back of SAED 81, indicative net completions. So your intention would be to put a table of that kind in with your trajectory graph in the appendix. Trajectory graph is obviously going to be out of date and will need to be replaced with an up-to-date version at the end. And already, on the basis of what we've talked about this morning, there are already obviously updates to that that will come forward. Now we've talked about MM1, that will be reflected in figures as well. In terms of knock-on changes to the housing requirement figure going up in light of MM1, it features in your monitoring indicators, as well as there's going to be various places in the plan that it's going to need to be checked through. SHO1's an obvious one, but it's going to need, it's going to be all over the place, isn't it? But it's also in that monitoring indicator. Indicator SDSA specifies the figure. So that would need checking. Is there any way in which the discounted level of supply influenced the housing requirement figure? Would removing the discounts have any influence on the way in which the housing requirement figure was derived?
Yes. I'm thinking yes. But yeah, off the top of my head, yes, because the allocations were variously discounted. So yes.
So that figure wasn't on the gross capacity, it was based on a discounted version of the allocation.
Yes.
The 10434. So the 10434 was suppressed effectively by the discounts.
Yes.
There's another thread
We need to
that would need unpicking.
And that will work through to the 5-year supply, because it'll affect the requirement, won't it?
Yes, it would be helpful if you could, I think, confirm your position on that once you've had a chance to look at it and think about whether that is the case or isn't the case. But as an action, it would be helpful if you could confirm what the position is and what difference it makes in terms of the overall figure.
Yes, if we do reach the conclusion that it does have an effect, then we might need to include that in our reworking of the numbers in SAED 81.
Yeah, precisely. It will feed right through potentially, because the requirement figure would go up a little bit more than we've already discussed this morning, potentially, wouldn't it? And your annualised requirement equally. So
At the moment, but yes, but we'll need to think about it with a cold town round ahead for the start.
Yeah, I'd rather than off the top of your head, I'd rather you confirm the actual position. Yeah.
But whatever we do, the figures in SAD SAED 81 are going to change slightly as a result of
They are.
this morning's discussions, and we'll need to discuss whether you want a short-term resubmission of that work, or whether you're happy to wait until we publish main mods, whether you want to see a revision in the interim, as it were.
I think I will need to see a revision in the interim. It won't be the final work, I understand that, but in light of confirm the effects that the taking off the discounts would have on the overall requirement figure and the sort of headline knock-ons to SAED 81 that would have.
And the flattening of the peak, if we decide to flatten the peak, etc., etc. We'll
if you review the peak.
Yeah.
And an interim position on that as soon as you can would be very helpful. And then obviously there will be, once you know exactly what position I want you to take with the mods overall,
yes,
you can produce the final version, which we will I will check, and all that work will happen before we get to a point that a modifications consultation can start. So okay. I'm just seeing what else we might want to talk about, and therefore whether to have our break now it might be an appropriate moment. Miss Barton, is there anything so far that you wanted to comment on with regards to the site that you're interested in? You're just listening quietly.
I have been sitting very quietly. I think the only comments I would make is I would agree with the likelihood of the alterations in terms of adoption and the 5-year supply position, and would just echo my comments from earlier in terms of our anticipated trajectory of what may be feasible on our client site and bringing that forward.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. Right, I think we'll take a short break now because it's quite a lot to think about for you and for me, all of this, and then we'll come back and just finish off a few bits about monitoring, and I will have a think about what else, if anything, you might need to do in the short term for me in relation to all of this. So if the council's happy for that, I think maybe we'll take sort of 20 minutes and come back about at 10 past 11. Does that work for you? Yeah. Council okay with that?
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, welcome back. It's 11:10. Thanks for being back on time. Miss Bardner, you're back with us as well.
Hello, yes, I am.
Hi, yes, that's great. Thank you very much.
Hi, all.
Has the council had any burning thoughts or anything that you want to add in light of what we've discussed so far during that break? I'm not necessarily saying you should have done, but just an opportunity if there was anything that's come to mind.
No, we've done some preliminary number crunching, but we'll I think take our time before we send you anything.
That's fine. So we've already agreed that you'll look at an interim update to SAED 81 and send that to me. Have you had any thoughts on how long you might need to prepare that?
Well, we I think are thinking that depending on what time this session finishes today, we will just stay here and do it.
Okay, and the answer to that is I suspect it will finish fairly soon because there's a limit to how much we can keep discussing when we know we need updated information. So I think we will have largely covered the headline topics. There's just a couple of points I want to raise about monitoring shortly, but so fairly soon then would be the answer if you get to work on it this afternoon.
Yes, that's what we intend to do.
That would be great. Okay. So during the break, I've had a look through my notes as to whether there's anything else that I can usefully raise at this point in relation to supply and trajectory type strands. And I think, again, until we get the updated information, we've come to the end of the discussion on much of that for today. So I'm happy that we leave it there. So what I wanted to raise briefly in relation to actually one very quick thing, it's 5-year supply of sites for travellers. Is there a 5-year supply of sites for travellers? No. And we just did talk about it under SHO 9, didn't we? So, in terms of the monitoring framework, beyond what we already discussed, Mr. Carroll the other day raised the point about, or a point about air quality monitoring. And that led me to look at the monitoring indicators for the SHW policies. SHWB, which is on page 421 of the plan, talks about monitoring the number of planning permissions granted with outstanding objections from the environmental health team. None of the others seem to potentially relate to policy SHW3, which was the air quality policy. Is that indicator intended to monitor that policy?
Yes, it is. So that's the way we've monitored it in recent years, is that we speak with environmental health to understand how many applications essentially have been granted permission and they've got an outstanding objection, and environmental health usually comment separately on issues relating to noise and issues relating to air quality where relevant.
Okay, and we heard the other day about there's an air quality action plan in place and there's presumably separate monitoring, air quality monitoring going on in line with that, and you were going to provide me with the plan for the library anyway. So I just wanted to get clarity really on what's happening with air quality monitoring, but that's separate to the plan, isn't it?
Yes, I suppose it's monitoring in a different sense in that there's physical monitors around the borough monitoring the level nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We've talked about the consequential changes to the monitoring framework from whatever happens with the revised housing requirement figure. Indicator SHOA, which is on the following page, 422, that one talks about table 5 and phased housing targets. So obviously table 5 is going to change, and you said to me before that the putting it into 5-year categories as table 5 looks in the plan wasn't about phasing anyway, so I think that indicator is going to need an update as well, isn't it?
Yes, I agree with that. Thank you for working it out.
So what's that?
Page 422, showing.
Monitoring indicator SHOA, and the target related to that needs a review.
Yeah.
And you may be about to mention it, Inspector, but the one below as well relating to affordable units, the targets doesn't reflect the policy position either.
Yes. I mean, in reality, again, the monitoring framework, once the main mods are completed, in terms of being drafted, we'll need a quick check to make sure that it reflects those, won't it? So there might be others as well, but I haven't been through the monitoring framework with a fine-tooth comb, but those are key ones.
There's PAM 42, which deals with SHOB.
Okay. Presumably that is that in terms that you've just mentioned to me? Yeah.
Yes, that is.
Yes.
So are you happy that that is an additional mod, or should that be a main mod?
I'm happy that that one is an additional mod, I think, because it's not, the levels in the policy weren't changing, were they? So this is just a sort of factual update to reflect what SHO4 says. Okay, I think that's all I want to cover in this session. Is there anything else from the council or from Miss Barton before we draw this to a close? No? Nothing from the council. Mr. Richards, shall we do the usual
Yes,
run
let's
through?
do that.
Thank you.
So we have been talking a lot about SAED 81, which we are going to do an interim update, and hopefully get that to you by the end of the day.
That would be ideal if you can. Thank you very much.
And as part of that work, we're going to look at the peak years in the trajectory for sites without planning permission, and see whether that needs to be flattened and shifted to the right. Then we are going to make sure that we add any shortfall into the 5-year housing land supply calculations. We are going to include windfalls in years 4 and 5, but that will also have the effect of needing to add 2 years worth of windfalls into the supply, because at the moment the supply assumes windfalls will begin in 2030.
Yes.
We are going to include references to the next round of plan making in the context of the SDS at paragraph 16.2 in the plan, just to explain to people what's on the horizon. We're going to include the trajectory graph and the indicative net completions table in the appendix. And PAM 42 is going to stay as an additional modification. So.
Okay. And obviously, in terms of the work that you're thinking about doing this afternoon, I would suggest first job is work out where the housing requirement overall level sits with regard to the effect of the discount suppression, MM1.
Yes.
Because obviously everything else hangs after that, doesn't it? Yeah.
And just to confirm our understanding, the requirement in our case is going to be the supply, because normally the starting point for the requirement is need, and then you see whether you need to adjust for importing from neighbouring boroughs or the need for particular economic growth. But in our case, because we cannot get anywhere near the need in terms of supply, our requirement figure is simply going to be the supply figure.
Effectively, yes. At the moment, the requirement figure and your supply level, even though supply is discounted, don't quite match, do they?
No.
In terms of the submitted plans, supply is higher. So
it's because we've done another year of monitoring, so plan permissions.
Okay.
So the supply reflects. Some permissions may have dropped, but you've got another year of permissions within that. So
okay.
There as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It depends. So
yes.
25. So and that included extra coming into the supply, not
No, it has always been a capacity based.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just
housing requirement, hasn't it?
At that point, yeah. Yeah.
So yes, I mean, you don't go completely revising your methodology at this stage. Revise the inputs, not the methodology. Yeah. Okay. So I'll look forward to that when it's ready.
Okay, and looking ahead then, tomorrow is development management policies. Mm-hmm. Just so that we can again have some sort of feel for how tomorrow might roll out. Have you had any thoughts as to whether the afternoon session is likely to be required?
I suspect it won't be.
Okay.
Do you have the same
feeling? We do.
Yes.
We want to be presumptuous, but we would like to be able to plan some things for tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, no,
tentative plans for tomorrow afternoon.
I'm not intending to use the reserve session tomorrow unless something completely unexpected happens and we need to. But yeah, that's certainly not my intention.
Good. Okay, madam. Thank you very much. That's all from us.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, I will thank you, Ms. Barton, once again for your inputs, and I'll see those of you that are doing the development management session tomorrow morning at 9:30. Thanks very much. Oh, Ms. Barton, hang on before everyone goes. Yes, please.
I just wanted to say I'm only observing tomorrow's session. So I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to participate and contribute to the discussions, and that being a thank you to yourself, Inspector, the programme officer, and of course the council and other participants.
That's appreciated. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Barton, from us. You've been very constructive and very helpful.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll draw this session to a close.